All right, Steeler fans, it is time for the Behind Enemy Lines segment. And this is weird because last week, we had Scott Kennedy on and he covers the Atlanta Falcons. And I had him on in the offseason talking about Arthur Smith. Well, this guy, week 2, Denver Broncos, Tim Lynch, he's been on my podcast already this offseason. Why? Because he talks about Russell Wilson. Tim, welcome back to the program. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I can't complain. The Steelers are 1-0 and they're looking at this week 2 game in Denver. And I have a lot of interesting questions for you, but I guess Mike Tomlin spoke to the media on Tuesday, and when we're recording this, there's nothing definitive, but unless something drastic changes, it doesn't look like Russell Wilson might be playing. Again, when we're recording this could change. But Tim, does that depress you a little bit? Were you looking forward to seeing Russell Wilson return?
Uh, I mean, either way, it doesn't really play into it. I think the only outcome for me personally would have been negative because if Russell Wilson beat the Broncos, then I would, I'd feel bad. If the Broncos beat Russell Wilson, doesn't really affect me any. So he's
I get
moved
it.
on. The only outcome was going to be a negative. Probably. So
That's a great point, actually, because if you beat him, you're like, well, yeah, he sucked last year anyways. But if he beats you, yeah, that would be bad. Now,
yeah,
you also spoke the last time you were on our podcast about Justin Fields a little bit, and you talked about how you had followed his career, but mainly for fantasy football purposes. As a Broncos fan, when you hear the fact that Mike Tomlin says, hey, excuse me, Justin Fields is healthy, we're going to focus on the healthy guy, but it's probably good who's going to play. What are your thoughts on that situation?
well, he did win me a championship last year as my starting quarterback. So, um, the problem that I have is Denver's defense struggles more with mobile quarterbacks. So they matched up better against Russell Wilson.
Got it.
Um, I don't think Justin Fields is a world beater. I saw his passing chart today on Twitter or X, and he basically not a single pass over the middle of the field, not
No,
a one.
no.
Yeah,
It's like a
that's
strike. It's like a strike zone in
yeah.
baseball.
I think the tweet said, this is what the strike zone looks like when a pitcher's about to go back to the minors.
Accurate,
and,
yeah.
and Russell Wilson struggled with the middle of the field last year, and that was a big part of the problem and why he's not here anymore. But his passing chart last year makes this one look, way worse because there's literally not a single pass over the middle of the field. So,
Yeah.
um, that plays into the Broncos' strength because I do think they have solid outside corners. Their cornerback position in general is pretty solid this
Yeah.
year. Riley Moss has come along. He seems to be a solid number 2. Jaquil McMillian is outstanding for an undrafted guy, and then obviously Patrick Surtain is one of the best in the business. So
Mhm.
that plays into their strength. The weakness has been their linebacker position. Safeties are very inexperienced, so that's something that teams could exploit. I just don't know if Justin Fields can
Yeah.
exploit that. Alex Singleton is a bit of a liability in coverage, and frankly in the run defense. Both the third quarter, Seattle gashed the Broncos on the ground, and if you really look at the tape, it's gap responsibility. Alex Singleton's just taking bad angles and boom, 30-yard gain. Um, he did get an interception. He leads the league or leads the team in tackles. So there's like a good bad situation there. But I just don't know how Justin Fields will exploit that if
Yeah.
if he can't throw in the middle of the field. So.
Well, let's back up a hair and let's talk about Patrick Surtain. Does he follow the team's best receiver? Or does he typically stay on one side?
He hasn't in years past, but I thought today was Monday, so Sunday he shadowed DK Metcalf, and
Okay.
he had a pretty quiet day. I don't remember what DK's stats were. I just remember he didn't really catch a lot of balls. But actually, I can look that up. Yeah, 3 catches for 29 yards. So Surtain did his job.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think whoever your best wide receiver is a good chance. Surtain's just gonna follow him
Yeah.
around.
That's George Pickens. And the Steelers have, ever since the offseason where they entertained potentially trading for a million different receivers, everyone said if they don't get somebody, it's gonna be George Pickens and a bunch of other guys. And that's exactly what they have is George Pickens and a bunch of other guys. So if Surtain is traveling with Pickens, it's going to be really interesting to see how Arthur Smith tries to maybe manipulate the defense based on that receiver or that corner following that receiver. But I want to ask you about the offense of the Broncos. Last week, going to Seattle is a tough place to start your NFL career. And I think we have to start talking about Bo Nix. And Bo Nix is a very old rookie, very Kenny Pickett-esque in terms of when he came into the league and how much experience he had at the college level. What was your takeaway from the the debut of Bo Nix as the Broncos quarterback?
Yeah, like you said, it's probably one of the worst places to start your career in front of
Yes.
that Seahawks crowd. So I thought he handled himself okay. I don't understand the game plan against Seattle's defense there. They were just sitting on the short routes. They weren't letting anything, like they just didn't respect any intermediate to deep ball. And for some reason, Sean Payton's idea was to throw the ball to beat the Seahawks. I don't, Bo Nix had 23 passes in the first half, ended up with 42. I don't. That's just not a winning formula for a first time starting rookie. I think I saw a stat during the game. Rookie quarterbacks who throw in their first start, who throw for 32 or more attempts, are 220-1 all time. So no, 221-1 now, thanks to the Broncos on Sunday. But it's just not a winning formula. All season long, they talked about establishing the run. Bo Nix's job is going to be picking up those third downs. And, it looked in the preseason like that's exactly what we're getting. And week one comes and it's like Sean Payton flushed his game plan down the toilet from the preseason and just said, yeah, we're just going to throw the ball every down. And it was frustrating because the run game was working early in the first quarter. And by the second quarter, I think, I don't know. I'm a little frustrated because it was Seattle, and that's just, I'd rather lose, 26-13 and run the ball 40 times with a first time rookie than what I saw on Sunday. Hopefully he comes back this week and goes, okay, maybe we should run the ball more. And that's kind of what I'm hoping for on Sunday.
So, I mean, going up against Pittsburgh's defense is going to be another tough ask of Bo Nix because I think Pittsburgh's defense, and yes, I'm a homer, and yes, I'm a Steeler fan. I think they're going to be a top 5 unit at season's end, unless something crazy happens where they get a rash of injuries. But if everyone's healthy, they are going to be a really, really good group. And so, when you're thinking about trying to attack the Steelers, is it through the ground game? Is that your goal? Is to try and hey, we can't just let TJ Watt tee off on Bo Nix. What is your what's the offensive line like? Well, what in terms of tackles? Like, how is that looking in terms of trying to go against Pittsburgh's defense in particular?
Well, even before the first game, my concern of facing Bo Nix facing the Seahawks defense was elevated heading into that week. Looking at week 2, even before this last game, my concern for the Steelers defense was very elevated.
Yeah.
I would imagine TJ Watt is just licking his chops looking at the tape from the Broncos Seahawks game, because I think the Broncos protection issues were really bad. Let me find this. It was the best and worst O lines from the 33rd team on X. Broncos were the worst last week or on Sunday. Most pressures allowed, 44.9%.
Jeez.
Just to give you some context, the Steelers were third at 20%. So you guys had some solid protection.
Nice.
But how can a rookie quarterback, survive in that situation? And you do that by running the ball.
Yeah.
If Pittsburgh's defense is only going to give up 3 yards a carry, well, we're going to have to figure out a way to win in that environment and not give up on the run, especially against a defense like the Steelers, because that pass rush is quite scary. And I do think your defense is going to be one of the tops in the league this year. So advantage us. We're in Denver. Crowd's going to help us out a little bit, but yeah, it's going to be a tough ask.
What's the bread and butter of the defense for the Broncos? You mentioned that the weakness might be the inside linebackers, and how can you exploit those? So some people might say, well, Pat Freiermuth, this might be a game like for fantasy owners. You might want to think about it. But again, you go back to Justin Fields and Russell Wilson do not like to attack the middle of the field. So if that's the weakness, what is the strength of that defense in Denver?
Yeah, if you had a quarterback that would throw a tight end, I'd be far more concerned than I am with those two, because they just don't target that position. But over the offseason, Sean Payton really focused on the interior defensive line. The Broncos' run defense was atrocious last year.
Yeah.
Um, and while they did falter in the third quarter on Sunday, all the other quarters, the interior defensive line was dominating. They were getting push up the middle. They were pressuring. The edge rushers were doing well. So I'd say the defensive line in general is a low key strength. I was hoping the veteran additions on the inside were going to help, but it's all projection until you see them play. And outside of that horrible third quarter where I think Seattle scored 17 unanswered points, mostly on the ground. If they can avoid that and stick to what they did on the other three quarters of football, then this is going to be a pretty good defensive line against the run.
It's going to be interesting, and I think Denver's defense is underrated in terms of when people talk about the best defenses in the league, and every defense has their weakness. Like you bring up the inside linebackers, it's not like any defense, in my opinion, is perfect. I can see this being a lower scoring affair. When you think about this AFC matchup, though, what do you think about in terms of the outlook for the game? Not necessarily a score prediction right now. We might get to that at the end, but how do you see this game playing out in Denver?
I think it's going to be a slog fest because you've got two offenses that right now are pretty bad. You got quarterbacks that aren't playing good football. Maybe some of the play calling is questionable. I don't know if your running game was doing well last week. I didn't look that up beforehand, but the Broncos running game was kind of sucking. So I do think it's
The
going to be a lower
Steelers
scoring game.
last week rushed for 137 yards. Najee Harris had over 70, and I think Justin Fields had 50 some. So you got to think about that as well.
Yep. Oh yeah. Then see that's the X factor for Fields that I think makes him the better starter over Wilson, even if Wilson was healthy, is you're not going to get great quarterback play from either right now. So why not get the
Yeah,
running
it's a
ability
great
in
point.
there?
That's a great point. What do you think about a prediction for this game? And you might not have the numbers in your head right now. It's early. I get it. You don't know who's really going to be quarterback. But if you had to think about how this game plays out, what do you see?
Probably 11-10, one of those weird scoregami
Slobber
type
knocker.
situation. Yeah. So I think the defenses are going to dominate on both sides. It's going to come down to A, turnovers, and
Yep.
B, which offense can get a drive, get one drive in, punch it in. That could be the difference of the game.
Did you have confidence in Bo Nix in the preseason to think that he has that capability in him?
Absolutely. I mean, the part that frustrated me last week is we saw nothing of what we saw in the preseason. The none of the play calling. It was like the Sean Payton had like 3 plays in his pocketbook all game. Swing pass to a running back outside, first read, you know, and then a swing pass the other side for the running back for a short gain. It was maddening. There was no, and if you watch the film, they were his first reads. Like he was that you go to this guy first, and
Wow.
there was no like your first read being intermediate or it was just a super conservative game plan. And I don't know if Peyton was just didn't want to risk. It's just odd. Like
Yeah.
why call 45 or 48 passing plays? Because he dropped back like 48 times. Why call that many passing plays in a close defensive game? It boggled my mind. I'm hoping whatever Sean Payton was thinking, he rethinks it.
If you're writing a book about how to have rookie quarterbacks succeed in the NFL, that is not a chapter.
That ain't it.
That book was written by the 2004 Steelers with Ben Roethlisberger, and it was you run the football, you
Yes.
don't have him throw a lot, and you play good defense. And it sounds like the Broncos could be that type of team if the coordinator, aka head coach, follows suit. Am I right?
That's what we thought we were getting, and we got the opposite. So that's why we were kind of in disarray, just as fans
Yeah.
and bloggers, just like what the hell. But it is what it is. It's on to next week.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just a weird situation of being on the road in the worst possible environment, and Sean Payton thought he could outthink himself. And sometimes head coaches they think about something too much and do something they think will catch the other team off guard, and it's a complete disaster.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we saw.
All right, Tim, I thank you very much for your time. I know it's valuable and I appreciate it. Well, why don't you plug what you guys are doing over there for Fans First Sports Network in terms of the podcast and anything else you want to plug, social media, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, we do almost daily shows. They're more long form, and we've added some Spanish speaking podcast, and we got some guys
Nice.
in Ireland. So just trying to get out there to the Bronco fans everywhere, because Mexico's pretty big for Broncos country,
That's awesome.
and Cowboys fans are big down there too,
Yeah.
Raiders fans. But
Steelers are big down there too.
yeah, well, winning helps. When you win a lot of Super Bowls, you get that global
That's right.
exposure.
That's right. That's right. All right. Fantastic, Tim. Thank you very much for your time. Enjoy the game and we'll be in touch.
All right, take care.